Emma, can you hear us online? Just testing the microphones, just say hello if you can hear us.
I can, thanks Ruth.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Emma.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this Audit and Governance Committee meeting on Wednesday, the 28th of April, 2026. My name is Councillor Alan Platt, and I'm the chair of this committee. Members are reminded that the meeting is being recorded and will be accessible on the Council's YouTube page. If you wish to speak at any stage, please indicate to me you wish to do so. When I invite you to speak, please turn your microphone on and turn it off when you finish speaking. Please speak clearly and do not cover your mouth when speaking to make it easier for any lip readers to understand you. Can everyone ensure their phones are turned off? Sorry, turned to silent. We are not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarms sound, please exit the way you came in and congregate in St Thomas's Square next to the police station. We'll now begin the meeting. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Clifford, Councillor Green is substituting, and also from Pete Ripley, independent person. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ruth. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of matters contained within this agenda. Does anyone have any interest to declare? That's a no. Item 3, minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, the 26th of November 2025. That's pages 5 to 10 in the reports. The minutes of the last meeting were included within the agenda. Are there any comments or points of accuracy to raise? Okay, are we happy to approve the minutes? Can I have a show of hands, please? I'll tell you what, for the sake of good order, could I have a proposer, please, and a seconder? And we'll have another hands, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I told you to keep your eye on it. We'll move on to item 4, which is the External Audit Findings Report, pages 11 to 86. And this item is for us to consider and note the report. I'll now hand over to our external auditors to present the report. Over to you, Georgia.
Thank you very much. So my colleague Gareth presented our audit findings report to the committee in November, and we were just finishing some work around the valuation of land and buildings at that time. So this is just an updated final report to bring that kind of final conclusion back to you. So I won't go through it in detail because you've already kind of seen the majority of the report. I will just bring your attention to page 31 of the agenda, which is page 21 of our report. And just within there, we note that the main change to the accounts, which are on the agenda today, is around the valuation of Astley Hall. So the council had a new valuer this year who has looked at all the the relevant valuations for the audit, and one of those was Astley Hall. And when we looked at kind of the information that had been used and the information underlying the calculation, we identified that the build cost rates, so BCIS, it says there that's build cost rates used in the calculation, we didn't think were the appropriate ones for a building such as Astley Hall. So the officers consulted with the valuer, and that valuation was redone, which showed a decrease in valuation of 2.5 million. So that decrease has now been put through the statement of accounts and they have been corrected, and we're satisfied now with the valuation of Astley Hall. And the accounts are on the agenda, as I say, for your final approval. So really, that was the key thing that has changed since you last saw the report. So that was the only thing I was going to really bring to your attention, but obviously happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Georgia. Members of the committee, any questions for Georgia? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. A really clear report, and we congratulated the Finance Department and colleagues and yourselves last time as well. So I do think the management responses are clear to the issues that were raised. It does just say in one of the, I think page 32, that the land and building revaluations and investment properties are currently ongoing still. So are we not fully completed yet?
My apologies, it's probably just something we've missed updating. So all the work is actually complete, there's nothing more. So what we've done is try to update everything. We've obviously, even though you read things 10 times, you miss things. So apologies for that, everything is finished. I do anticipate signing the audit opinion this week.
Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, you've looked at this report. I wasn't on the committee, so I'm subbing today. I have some notes for cybersecurity, but I think, given that you've already looked at this, whether I just raise them directly with the team, if that's okay.
That will be considered in private after
Right,
the
yeah.
meeting. So
Oh, right,
we can
okay.
hold it till then.
Yeah, cool.
Any more questions? Councillor Hayden.
Thank you, Chair. A general one about the audit of risks, the significant risks, and how it's broken down. It's all targeted towards financial risk, I think. But what about reputational risk? Where is that dealt with?
So with the audit of the financial statements, of course, we are kind of trying to make sure that they show a true and fair view of the council's finances. So our audit findings report is around, kind of, as you have rightly said, financial risk. However, there was a report again on November's committee, which is our auditor's annual report, and that's our value for money work. So in terms of kind of the council's financial sustainability, governance arrangements, arrangements for securing the economy, efficiency and effectiveness, we look at kind of various criteria within them. So that would have been set out in that report. So in that report, we did say there was no significant weaknesses in any of the arrangements the council has for providing value for money. So just as a reminder, we're not giving an opinion on whether you provide value for money, but whether you have the arrangements in place in order to do so. So we would hopefully, because we look at governance in detail, if there was any areas where we thought there was some obvious or significant reputational risk, hopefully that would come out in that work and would be reported in that report.
Any more questions for Georgia? Can we take it that you're happy with the council then?
Yeah. I would say, in terms of the financial statements, we're going to give an unqualified opinion. That's the opinion you want. And as I mentioned, in terms of the value for money work, there was no significant weaknesses. So it's a very positive picture overall.
Thanks very much, Georgia. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Hayden.
About the audit adjustments on page 52, do we, the council management, pick up any lessons learned and any learning and development that needs to go into these areas where it needs to be strengthened?
So I'll hand over to Neil in a second, but if we think there's particular areas that need strengthening that comes out of our work, we do put audit recommendations in, so that you'll see the action plan and management responses to that. And also we have got a meeting with officers next week to talk through the audit process, issues we found, and also how officers found the process as well, because obviously it's a two-way learning process sometimes. So all of those things, generally are picked up in the recommendations and the discussions we have, but Neil might want to kind of come in and comment as well.
I mean, the quick answer is yes. The longer answer slightly is it's been more difficult in recent years as audits have kind of been towards the end of the cycle, because we're already preparing for year end, as you can imagine, at this stage in the day. So it's harder when we were signing off in February then to implement changes ahead of the following year when we're only there. But the issues that are on here, as Georgia said, were identified back in November, so we've had some time to go, these are the things we can change ahead of year end this time. I think particularly the ones around debtors, it's just additional checks that we can build into our processes. Around valuations, I think I discussed this in November as well. We have now got a valuer who we did commission through a period of 3 years. We've not had consistency of valuer for a number of years. I think that will help us. Certainly through the Astley Hall conversation and things like that, we've got now a basis for valuations going forward that you would hope that could be used consistently because it's a consistent relationship with the same company. So I think that helps us as well moving forward. But fundamentally, yes, we always look and go, what extra checks could we do? What controls can we put in place?
Any more questions from anyone? If there's no further questions, we'll move on to the next item. What I want to do is I want to bring forward item 13 because of the nature of the item, and it follows on very nicely from this. If none of the committee have any objections. Is it? Oh, I've got 13 on.
Yeah, 13. Did you say 14?
No, 13.
13.
So 13, just to clarify, 13, 1, 3. Is the committee happy to do so? Right. Item 13.
Can I just give the title to the statement of accounts, so everybody knows that it's statement.
The item 13 is a statement of accounts 2024-25 update, which is what we'd alluded to in the previous one. Following publication of the agenda, following discussion with the Director of Finance, we've allowed this item to be considered, and we're asked to approve the amendments set out in the report, and Neil's going to present this item.
Apologies. So fundamentally, this statement of accounts is the same one that you saw in November, apart from the changes we've just discussed. So that's why the item clearly follows on from the last item on the agenda. So the only updates to what was agreed in November are those around Astley Hall. They are a change to the valuation, but fundamentally there is no impact of that valuation on the day-to-day kind of business of the council. So yeah, that's the only change to the report. I don't propose to say too much more than that. I'm happy to take any questions on that or anything else. So,
any questions for Neil? 10 by surprise. Thank you for that. Now, if I've got to the right page. Oh, sorry. Right, can we move to vote on agreeing these amendments then? Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Beach, a seconder? I'm blessed. All those in favour? Thank you. Hopefully I'll get this one right. We shall now move on to the Internal Audit Progress Report as at the 31st of December 2025, pages 88 to 104. The item is for us to consider and note the report and agree to the deferral of the repairs and maintenance review. Before I hand over to Dawn, please may I remind members that if you have any questions regarding the audit review of the security incident response, there's a separate confidential item later in the agenda, so we'll cover that then. So, Dawn, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So as you've highlighted, this is our update report and shows the progress that we've made against the audit plan since we last reported in September last year. Appendix B sets out a summary of all the work that has been completed to date, and all the actions arising from the reports have been agreed and will be followed up to ensure implementation in our usual way. We do have a number of directors here today, as well as a head of service in attendance, so if you have any specific questions about the reviews that we've completed, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer. Moving on down the report, paragraph 11 shows the assurance ratings that we've awarded since April 25, and this shows quite an even split over the 4 ratings, which is in line with previous years. As you highlighted, we are requesting one amendment to the plan, and this is detailed under paragraph 12 of the report. We are proposing that the review of repairs and maintenance is deferred to Q2 of 26-27, so a slight delay in terms of months. That would be undertaken between July and September this year to allow time for newly introduced processes to embed. If we take a look at Appendix C, this sets out the current status of agreed audit actions, and again this is largely a positive picture. The majority of actions are being implemented in a timely fashion, with only a relatively small number of actions taking longer than the agreed date. We do talk with directors and heads of service about these actions and where they're up to, and that there are none at the minute that I'm particularly concerned about. Finally, in the report, we are due to start the planning process for the next 6-month audit plan. So if there's any areas you would like to be considered for inclusion, then please let me know when my contact details are there. But I'm happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. Any questions for Dawn? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, and thanks for the report. Obviously, there's a few meaty ones in there, isn't there? Because we've got 2 minimals and 2 limited reports. So just in terms of process, will they come back here in their full, the limited ones, will they come back here in their full report, or is this what we see of them? That's the first question.
This is what we see.
This is what we see,
Yeah.
okay. So on the actual report, although it tells us, so let's take fees, for instance, which I think is the 4th one, the fees and charges. It tells us that it's limited, but we can't see the number of actions in there or where they're at or when the report took place. So if I then, and this might be me reading it wrong, if I go to the table of the summary of agreed actions, I can't see it on that table. So I can see the volunteer one with 12 actions, 12 not implemented as yet. I don't know if fees and charges is sitting under that income generation or under a different one on that table.
That just would have been the timing of when, because of the Christmas period,
Right.
we would have looked at the implementation of audit actions perhaps slightly earlier, but then with the reporting deadlines, we've most probably issued fees and charges in time for it to be reported. So that's just a timing issue. When we update the audit actions next time, it will be on.
Okay, so so that's the most recent one then that's been done.
Yeah.
It's just not on the table in the actual
Yeah.
report.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I think it's just that one that's missing from it. I wouldn't mind it, given that we're only going to see these here, probably just to ask a few questions or 1 or 2 on each one. I think is probably the best one. So let's start with management of volunteers then. So it's quite stark reading, that one, that we've got. It sounds like we've got volunteers working for the council and we either don't know who we are, there's no central control over them. I just wonder, have we got an idea of how many there are and what kinds of risks this gives us by, for instance, should we have volunteers who are DBS checked? Is there any risk at all that we've got people working with families maybe? I don't know what kind of roles they're undertaking that possibly they should have been DBS checked and aren't because of that.
There we go. Oh no, I'll press this one, that's your... Right, we don't have any volunteers working with families. Generally the volunteers that we have are generally related to maintenance of parks and some of our friends groups. So we don't have anybody in those sorts of roles and responsibilities. So for example, the community team, housing and social prescribers, we don't use volunteers in our services at all. So generally, when we're talking about volunteers to the council, we're talking about general maintenance and working with friends groups for parks and open spaces. But what we've been trying to do, particularly in communities, is encourage community groups to set themselves up. So we've got one of our team is a volunteer coordinator, but it's volunteers for outside of the council to get them the governance set up so they can establish themselves as a group, do all the DBS check-in and other things themselves, and that's what we're working on, to look at the groups outside of the council who support the council.
Okay, thank you for that, Jennifer. I mean, there's some real opportunity here, isn't there, with because there are lots and lots of people that would like to volunteer who've got a lot of skills that we could possibly use, certainly with the community, but it's good to know that we don't think we've got a risk around current DBS issues. But there's obviously a risk then in terms of insurance. That's one of the things that was pulled out if we don't know who they are. So in terms of timelines for getting even a central register of who these are, do we know the timescales? And just another question of that, do volunteers put expenses in at all for anything that they're doing, like travel, etc., and do we have control over that?
So I'll answer this one. Obviously within the audit, it was identified that this needs to sit somewhere centrally. So this will become a corporate responsibility. So it's something that obviously I'm looking at, particularly in respect of how the council uses volunteers. So I'm looking at developing and refreshing our shared policy, and obviously putting some arrangements in place around the different sort of like checks for the different types of levels of volunteers like that we have. As Jennifer rightly said, I've obviously been doing some research around the different types of volunteers that we have, and we don't have any that do require any DBS check-in. It is, as Jennifer said, around sort of like supporting with our parts and maintenance and things like that. And obviously we do try and encourage people to join a constituted group, which would have their own like insurance, but we are looking obviously like at where we would be using volunteers like as a council, where we would need to put some of those like checks and balances in place, and also as well like looking at opportunities where we can like use like volunteers more. So there have been some like open conversations across obviously the workforce around where we could potentially use volunteers and what that would look like, and making sure obviously that the policy and processes would support that.
Thank you. I think there's a real opportunity as well around celebrating people that want to volunteer, and if we did something central where we've got oversight of that, then we can make sure we're doing that as well, because I think there's possibly something being missed here by not having that. If I can just ask one on the fees one then. And apologies, it's newish then, this one. So I'm going to look at Neil. So it does talk about the finance department having oversight of setting through the budgets about what the increase, etc. are, but obviously there's a disconnect to what's actually happening in some of the current departments by the sounds of it. What are the plans? Are we looking at further centralisation and a bit more, this is what you need to do, or what are the thoughts around that?
So we kind of, even during the audit, we kind of identified this as an issue in terms of the communication. I think one of my comments would be in terms of materiality and scale, it tends to be the small ones that get missed, which doesn't justify it, but it does tend to be those, because the bigger ones inevitably get picked up by other controls, including budget monitoring and checking that those fees and charges have been done. So we held a session with the leadership team back in September now, basically restating what the aim of fees and charges were. We reissued the lists of fees and charges for comparison. We also then went to each manager with the management accountants and talked through those. So there's an element there. In terms of the coming period, I think the communication to getting things onto the system was clearly one of the issues. So it was just a case of, yes, well, it's been agreed, updating the system takes a little bit of time sometimes. So that bit we've improved, we've communicated, we've been clear when the decision's been made, when it should apply from. So I would hope to see an improvement in that. I think the bit of the fees and charges report in particular that we probably still need to do more work on is that while management accountants work with teams to develop costings, there isn't really a set methodology for how we do that. And I think some of the outcome of the audit was put that in writing to say we will apply this standard across the board. Now, to a certain extent, my team are a finance team who support them, so applied fairly consistent methodologies to that anyway. But I think it was put that in a document so that managers are clear and have more ownership of understanding how that fee and charge is created. So I think they were the main actions. A lot of it was communication, and then this element of clarity over how a fee and charge is costed so people own it better.
Thank you. There is a potential though that we're missing some income, albeit in some areas it will be small amounts.
There's a potential, yes. It almost certainly will be small amounts because of the items identified were all around the general increase, where people hadn't put that general inflationary uplift on there. In terms of fees and charges that we charge that generate significant amounts of income, a lot of those planning fees are set nationally. They're not set by ourselves. The big items in the fees and charges report, which comes each January to Cabinet, that have individual recommendations, absolutely were all implemented in time. So yes, there will be some small one, but we're probably talking hundreds of pounds potentially, but absolutely it's still potential lost income.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Contract management. So we've talked about this one a few times before, and we've talked about the new system that's coming in. It's quite a stark report, isn't there, about some of the things that we need to do. Do we think the new system's going to address a lot of this, or is there still quite a bit of work to do underneath to try and get some of that addressed?
I mean, I think basically the Tech One system will establish some of the centralised access for contract managers so that everything is in one place. However, I think what's been identified is that there is a requirement for training. So I can obviously share with you that there was a training, there was a training around contract management, fundamentals of what contract management looks like, and that was uncovered last week, and there was about 80 people that actually joined that training session, so that's a really good turnout. We are also undertaking some further training with an external company in February, whereby specific individuals who manage contracts will be doing a workshop in terms of what happens from the commencement of procurement process all the way to the end. So I think it's a work in progress, and I think some of the audit actions that are set out within the actual report hopefully will be covered in due course.
Thank you. And then in terms of the events, well, I don't know who's that one. In terms of the risk that we're currently holding, have we got an indication of what that is and how long we think the actions will take to be addressed?
Yes, so we have actually started to implement some of the actions around the external events. I think the first one was around ensuring that there's clarity around where it sits. So it will be picked up by the events team within the visitor and communications service. And we have now included that in the responsibilities of some of the roles within the team. Those jobs have been reevaluated to obviously to make sure that those responsibilities will be picked up by those people undertaking the roles. And we have started on drafting and developing the policy and the processes that were identified as actions. So we intend to have that all in place by April. So we have made a start on that.
That's really good, thank you. Just a final comment, there's a lot in it, but I think it's really good to see an internal audit department putting those challenges in and officers working well with them as well, because this is all about improving how we move forward and making sure that we're not missing anything as well, and about teamwork in that. So I think that comes across really well, so thank you. I'll stop now.
Totally agree, Councillor Brown. What a marvellous job Dawn and the team do, as does everyone else, of course. And thank you to Caroline and Jennifer for taking the questions. Right. Oh, sorry.
I didn't know whether you were taking them all collectively or not. Just one question on the contracts management review. I just wondered, in terms of at what level within the council officers are authorised to sign contracts on behalf of the council, and who takes ownership for that? Is it at head of service level, or does it depend on a particular contract?
So in terms of what it stipulates in the contract procedure rule, so is anything which is above key decision, which is £180,000, that's normally done under seal, and the authorised officers around that are the chief exec and the director of governance and deputy, so that would be myself. In terms of any sort of contracts between sort of the medium aspect, which is between 30 and 100, that can be signed by directors. 380,000, that can be signed by directors. So, and it's normally within the actual service area, but legal are always legal should be involved in that aspect as well, so that they've actually checked those contracts that have been put through and then signed off.
So just a follow-up check. So in terms of the report identified a number of contracts that hadn't been signed and were missing, do we know the value of those contracts?
I wouldn't know off the top of my head, because obviously I haven't got it in front of me, but is that something you could share, Dawn?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, we would have to go back and look at the working papers, but that's something we could let you know.
I'm just curious at what point there appears to be have been a failure, that's all, whether it's at the high end or whether it's at the low end of contract value.
Yeah, I can tell you the sample that we tested was the range, but yeah, if you need more information on that, that's something I can certainly share.
Thank you. Any more questions, committee members? Right, we're asked to note the report, so we'll take that as noted. And we're also asked to agree the deferral of the repairs and maintenance review for the reasons provided within the report. Are we happy to do so? Could I have a proposer, please? Thank you. Seconder? All those in favour? Thank you. We'll now move on to item 6, which is the Audit and the Governance Effectiveness Review, pages 105 to 118. And this item, again, is for us to consider and note. We'll pass over to Dawn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is a report that comes to you on an annual basis, and it's the self-assessment of the effectiveness of the committee against the guidance issued by CITFA. And it's very much a good news story. Appendix A sets out how the committee is meeting the best practice guidance, and basically we're meeting it in full. There's only one small action which we're going to take forward, which is the training and development programme, which is currently being compiled following the feedback session from late last year, so that will be brought forward to a future meeting. But other than that, as I said, it's a very good news story.
Thanks, Dawn. Any questions? Come on, this is us, come on. No? Right, if there aren't any questions, then we'll move on to the next item, which is item 7, the Annual Governance Statement Action Plan Update, pages 119 to 122. Again, this one's for considering and noting.
Thank you. So this one is just an update on the actions from the annual governance statement as stated. The table at point 10 is probably the most relevant table to look at in the report in respect to where we're at. 4 of the items are completed. One of the items we've just discussed around contract management is that ongoing piece of work around that. In respect to the only other one that isn't then completed, there is a piece of work around GDPR and data compliance, for which we are commissioning an external provider to have a look at kind of, it's really ring fencing that piece of work for us and giving us the scope as to where we need to operate in to understand to then enact those changes. So that piece of work's still ongoing. Once we've got that scope, we'll action upon it and make sure that we're meeting anything that they identify as being required. And I think that's the key points of the update, really, as we said, the contract management we've covered.
Thanks, Neil. Any questions for Neil? I'll just have the one then. Paragraph 8, which refers to the directors. We lost a director. Are there any plans to replace or not?
Is this in the annual governance one? Is it in there? Is that the next report?
Right, reset. So no questions. If there's no, we'll move on to the next item. Item 9, which is the regulation. Item 8. Update on leisure governance, pages 123 to 128. This item is for us to receive an update and note the report. and we'll pass over to Neil.
So this is an update on the leisure governance specifically. This actually came from an action during the peer review that was undertaken that members may remember, which was that we should look at all the companies that we hold and how we do those companies. At that time, there were two separate companies. One of them we proposed to close, which is Chorley Property Limited, and then the leisure company, which clearly is active and ongoing. This report was following a review by Dawn. It was a response to that review to say, what should we be doing kind of more transparently, more details, what should we be bringing forward in respect to the leisure company to ensure that both you as members are clear on what the role of the leisure company is and how it operates, and that we assure ourselves we've got the relevant governance in place. So I think there's some background there in why the company was set up. It was clearly set up in a time when COVID was still around, and there was a reaction to that and the need to bring the company in-house, and then the creation of the company. So the company was set up following a brief period when it was run within the council, and now is run as a separate legal entity within the council. So while the staff of the company operate for Chorley Leisure Limited, which is a private company, just for that company we do the similar kinds of activities that we do here. They buy in a lot of the council services, so most of the company's policies, procedures mirror the council's. We try to ensure that happens as much as possible. Clearly there are some unique things to leisure that apply to leisure, but we try to ensure that they mirror our processes as much as possible. I think the key actions that we identified really were at point 16 in the report, and I think they're largely broken down into that clarity of where reporting goes and the clarity of when we're reporting on the leisure company. So I think members have been receiving information on leisure that does form part of the statement of accounts that we've just approved, for example, as part of the group accounts. But I think sometimes part of the review identified it wasn't always clear that we were reporting on the separate legal entity in the company in those arrangements. So I think one of the things that we are going to do is bring forward a series of reports to clearly identify when we're talking about the leisure company, and bring to this committee the statement of accounts, for example, that we produced for the company and things like that. So I think they were the main actions. It was that clarity of where we need to update rules, where we need to be transparent, and where we need to bring that and identify and say, this is the separate legal entity that we're debating there. I'm happy to take any questions on that. Jennifer is also here, who is the Managing Director of the Leisure Company, so I'm sure we can hopefully answer any questions.
Thanks, Neil. Councillor Beach.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to steal one of your questions that you asked. So, as in paragraph 8, it says that the third director post has been vacant. Are we looking to replace that when? And would it be with the same Director of Governance? And on page 126 of the agenda, it says member training, arrange external training for relevant member roles on company law and governance. Which members would you be looking at? Us as a committee, or more specific to those that sit on the board? Thank you.
So in respect to the director, it was always our intention to ensure that we have 3 directors in the longer term. Obviously, recruitment for the Director of Governance and the Deputy Chief Executive still is ongoing at the moment. I think our plan was we could temporarily survive with 2 directors, but we absolutely think there is a need to have a third for that assurance and cover more than anything else, should there be any issues in respect to myself and Jennifer. So the plan is still to fill it. If we don't fill those roles, I think the plan will be to find somebody else to fill that role. If there's no permanent Director of Governance appointed, I think we will look to fill the role with another appropriate person, because we do need to ensure that there are at least 3 directors. In respect of your second point around member training, I think there's 2 aspects. One is this committee. I think fairly evidently that this committee will be one of those that needs that training. I think the other element of it is it references to the shareholders, which is essentially the cabinet of the council, who I think in their shareholding role also need that kind of training on companies and understanding the decision making of it. So they'd be the 2 that we would target first.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I'd welcome the transparency around this. I'm really interested in it, actually. Just in terms of the staff, staff that are employed by the company, I know it says that they're on the same pay rates as the council. Are they on the same terms and conditions as council staff as well, not just pay?
They're on the similar terms and conditions with slight exceptions to meet the specific company need that was agreed with the union at the implementation. For example, they work different hours, for example, because that worked better with the shift patterns that already existed in the company organisation. So they are local authority terms and conditions, but with slight tweaks to reflect the realities of what was required for the leisure company. But fundamentally, yes, they're on local government pension scheme, so the fundamentals are the same.
So thank you. And then in terms of the resources, the council resources that are being used, so you've got finance, HR, internal audit, IT, etc. I take it we're recharging and there's no cross-subsidy between the council and the limited company?
Yeah, so there are SLAs set up between the individual services and the leisure companies. I think that some of those need refreshing because some were set up in the kind of initial start-up period of it. But yeah, there is, and we build back and forth and ensure that it reflects the cost of the company.
Yeah, I think the formalising it, bringing it will help with that as well. So yeah, it's all good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hayden.
Can I ask you where South Ribble Leisure sits? Is it within Chorley Leisure?
No, so South Ribble is 100% owned by South Ribble Council, is completely separate legal entity again, doesn't have any crossover with Chorley Leisure other than the fact that both myself and Jennifer are directors of each of the companies, but fundamentally they operate separately, separate bank accounts, separate arrangements for everything.
Any more questions from the committee members? Nope. Right, if no further questions, we'll move on to the next item again, which is item 9, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000 update. And Taz assures me she's got an update.
Thank you, Chair. So the report before you members provides you with an update on the Council's use of its powers under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, RIPA, and it requests for your approval to the revised policy on the use of covert surveillance and covert human intelligence resources. So the policy has been revised to reflect change in job titles. It's very minor, and obviously in addition to that, it includes a section around complaints to the Council and to the independent tribunal should an individual believe they have been subjected to unauthorised covert surveillance. And you can find that policy at Appendix A within your papers, and the amendments are highlighted in red font. The report also requests members' authorisation to me to make any minor amendments to the policy as required. So the report alongside the revised policy sets out the ways in which the Council can use covert powers lawfully. And what you'll find is that in addition to obtaining internal authorisation by authorised officers in respect of the testing of necessity and proportionality, there's also a requirement now to obtain judicial approval by magistrates, and that was as a result of changes in legislation back in 2012. In that regard, judicial approval will only be authorised if certain criteria are met, such as that there's a criminal offence which is under investigation carrying a term of imprisonment of 6 months or more, and the offence relates to the sale of alcohol or tobacco to minors. The Council has not made any use of its RIPA powers since 2008. Nevertheless, as you appreciate, there is still a requirement to ensure that the Council has an up-to-date policy in place available to officers of the Council. The Council is subject to inspections by the Investigatory Powers and Commissioner's Office, and the last time that the Council was inspected was back in 2023. Now, those inspections are normally sort of every 3 years. And as a result of that inspection back in 2023, there was no recommendations for any improvements at that point. However, what I can share, and this is obviously at South Ribble was inspected this month, and a recommendation was made by the IPCO that the actual policy should be reviewed on an annual basis. So on that recommendation, I would suggest that we will bring the actual policy for review on a yearly basis now, moving forward. So hopefully next January you'll have the revised policy again. So just wanted to touch upon it, training and awareness. So you'll find that in the report there is mention around training and awareness, and I can confirm that the authorised officers did undertake training on the 14th of January, and e-learning training has been undertaken by investigative officers with a deadline to complete that by the end of this week. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Taz. Any questions for Taz? Councillor Berry.
I'd just like to thank you for bringing this to the committee, and there's been some meat to it this time. I just wondered where you think there's risk of non-compliance, with emerging issues. I've talked about doorbell surveillance and taking data information from, say, social media. Are you looking at that at all?
I think the main point to make in respect of that is the fact that officers have had that training, so they know that basically there's certain scenarios where you can't use surveillance in a certain way. And I suppose the message to officers is that if you've got any concerns around that, come and speak to one of the authorised officers, or come and speak to a legal officer.
Any more questions? Got off lightly. Right, firstly, we're asked to note the information regarding the Council's use of powers under the RIP Act. Secondly, that we are asked to approve the updated policy for the use of covert surveillance and covert human intelligence. Are we happy to approve it? Yeah, proposed, please. And a seconder? All those in favour? Thank you. And finally, that the head of legal and procurement be authorised to make any administrative amendments to the policy as required. Again, a proposer, please. Councillor Beach, seconder. Councillor Berry. All those in favour? Thank you. Item 10, if I've managed to turn the pages over correctly this time, we'll deal with the work programme, which is pages 341, 342 in the papers. This item is just for information and an opportunity for the committee to ask any questions about upcoming agenda items or training. Anybody, any questions? Okay. Sorry? Oh, sorry, Craig.
Just a question through you, chairs. Obviously, this it reminded me in an earlier report about the effectiveness of this committee. This committee is also effectively the Council's Standards Committee. I just wondered whether the committee received an annual standards report on the number of complaints that have been received and the outcome.
I'd have to double check, Chair, but I'm sure there's a report that came to this committee back in November of last year.
I think there was because it was something that was recommended and brought forward as a standing item at that point in the cycle.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsworth, for the question. It's most definitely something that needs to be done. We can confirm the last time that it was done for you and let you know in writing.
Right, sorry, I've just got to the bit that we brought forward, so bear with me 1 minute. I think we're down to an item for the I've lost track of what number it should be now because it's not the won't be the same anymore, but the exclusion of the press and public, and this item's for decision. Given the confidential nature of the next report, the committee is asked to consider exclusion of the public and press in accordance with paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Can I move for vote on excluding the press and public? Proposer, please. Councillor Beach, thank you. Councillor Berry, seconder. All those in favour?